Oh yeah, let the camera wars rage on. We got to talk about, should you buy the Sony A7 IV or should you buy the new Panasonic S5 Mark II, because both cameras are crazy. Let's get it. What's up, y'all? Tight Shirt Terry Warfield back for another video. Hey, I hope you're having a fantastic day so far. Remember to be thankful for your life today, because you did not have to have that. Before we get on with the meat and potatoes, a few housekeeping items I gotta go over. So number one, I don't script videos, okay? Now, for this video, obviously I took a bunch of notes, but I don't script, so I might mess up. In my last video, y'all was cooking me for making mistakes. Like, y'all do know I am human, and you make mistakes too. So with that being said, if I mess up, I just mess up. Just drop it in a comment if I made a mistake, all right? Next thing, I have no brand loyalty to either company. I love Sony, love Panasonic. They both take care of this channel. I use both of their products, especially now with the Lumix, and neither one of them is paying me to make this video. So I'm for the people, y'all. I try to give y'all my opinions and perspectives, unbiased, you know, even though I might have certain things I love about both companies. This is for the people, okay? Number three, if you can't get good results with either of these fantastic cameras, you just freaking suck. And number four, I was gonna go outside and drag this out how I typically do, you know, multiple videos, but it's cold outside and I figured let's just condense this into one video. So get your drink, get your coffee. It's about to be a long video, okay? Now, these are both companies' entry-level full frame options, okay? I throw the term entry-level out there loosely because both of these are way more than capable to be used in a professional scenario. I use the A7 IV professionally all the time. I just got the S5 Mark II, and I will be using this in some professional scenarios too. Both of these are full frame hybrid mirrorless cameras. They have a lot of similarities, to be honest. They're about the same size, same weight. They both offer unlimited recording. They both shoot in 4K 10-bit. They both have dual SD card slots. They both have full-size HDMI. Like, they both have really good EVFs. They both have flippy rear displays. Like, there's so many things that these two cameras have in freaking common, but there's a lot that they don't have in common, and that's what we're going to talk about. So I want to start off by saying all the things I think the S5 Mark II does better than the A7 IV. Then we'll flip those tables. Then we'll wrap everything up in one. Now, the first reason I want to talk about why you should buy the S5 Mark II over the Sony A7 IV's price. This is only $2,000 versus $2,500 with the Sony A7 IV. Now, $500 is not a huge difference. They're still in the same price bracket, but it's enough to afford another lens, a gimbal, something like that. And they're pretty evenly matched. So I gotta say, for the price, the Lumix get the winner because it's $500 cheaper. The second thing, and I'm actually gonna bring the A7 IV back into the picture because I want to talk about body, ergonomics, etc. The S5 Mark II brings something crazy that the A7 IV does not offer, and that is an internal fan. So there's a fan tucked right up underneath the hood, the EVF hood, and there's an exhaust port also on the S5 Mark II, which means it does not overheat like the Sony A7 IV does. The A7 IV has overheated on me a few times, not a whole lot, but it does overheat, so that's something that you need to be mindful of. Ergonomically, I'm sorry, Sony people, I love y'all, but I much prefer the Panasonic over the Sony. Number one, I think it looks better. Number two, I think it feels better. The grip is absolutely deeper on the S5 Mark II than it is on the Sony A7 IV. Now, from a top-down perspective, they both have dials, etc., buttons all over the place, but I just find that I prefer the construction of the S5 Mark II better. It has the same EVF as the A7 IV when it comes to resolution, but the rear display on the S5 Mark II is far superior. It's almost 2 million dots versus just 1 million dots on the A7 IV. The A7 IV has these eyelets that you connect the strap to. The S5 has the eyelets built into it now, and overall I just prefer to look at S5 Mark II. In my opinion, it just looks like a better camera. Now, that's not to say the A7 IV is bad, but it doesn't look as good as in comparison. It doesn't feel as good in comparison to the S5 Mark II. Now, let's talk some photography stuff real quick that the S5 Mark II does better than the Sony A7 IV. Number one, S5 Mark II has pixel shift built into it, so you can get 96 megapixel photos. It also has internal focus bracketing, and it can do with the electronic shutter 30 frames per second burst with autofocus continuous, so that's pretty dope. Now, the next thing I'm gonna give the W to the S5 Mark II for is stabilization. Now, look, I'm gonna be honest, a lot of YouTubers ain't willing to tell you this. The S5 Mark II definitely has some wobble when it comes to vlog style shots. Panasonic has already given us a firmware update to address this, so it works a lot better over 20 millimeters, but under 20 millimeters, especially like with the 18 millimeter f1.8, there is still some wobble there. It's not perfect, but aside from that, I think the S5 Mark II has the best stabilization out there. especially with the boost modes. You can literally hold the S5 Mark II handheld and lock it off in the boost or tripod mode, and it looks like it's on a freaking tripod. So the W absolutely goes to the S5 Mark II when it comes to stabilization. Now, I gotta take a little bit of time and spend it on video, because video is a huge emphasis on every Lumix camera, and I'm just gonna be honest, hands down the Lumix is the better video camera. And there's so many reasons why. I wanna start off number one with just the amount of resolutions, codecs, etc. available on a freaking S5 Mark II. It can shoot up to 6K 30 frames per second, 10-bit 420 open gate. So you can go 4:3, you can go 16:9, you can go any freaking frame size that you want to, but up to 6K 30 10-bit, which is wild to be able to do that in camera, especially open gate. Now, the next thing is there's all types of like video assist tools built into the S5 Mark II that just frankly are not in the Sony A7 IV. And I said this in the last video. I really appreciate how Panasonic has come out the gate literally throwing everything at this freaking camera. It really shows you how Canon, Sony, everybody is dragging their feet when it comes to software-based video stuff that, in my opinion, my FX3 doesn't even have. And this is not even a film camera. It's ridiculous that no other companies are giving us this stuff. What are those things, though? We talk about things like shutter angle. We talk about things like synchro scan. We talk about things like having vector scopes and waveforms that you can put on the screen. You talk about things like anamorphic D-squeeze built into the camera. You talk about things like being able to turn off noise reduction in camera and all of that good stuff that every camera should have. Panasonic gives it to you. The other thing I really love about it is when you connect the external monitor and you want to put the info on the screen, the Panasonic S5 Mark II still allows you to see the monitor on the back of the camera and the one on your monitor. The Sony A7 IV will black out the monitor on the back of the camera once you select info output, whatever that setting is, to put the info on the screen. You can actually record RAW over HDMI with a paid upgrade on the S5 Mark II. On the A7 IV, you just can't do that. Also, again, at $2,000, you can load your custom LUTs on here and bake them into the footage if you want to. And typically, these features are only reserved for like cinema cameras. So to have that in a $2,000 hybrid camera is freaking dope. The last thing that I'm gonna give the W to the S5 Mark II, and I'm gonna miss a whole lot of stuff. There's so much stuff that I could sit here and go tit for tat on, I'm just not. But these are the key things in my opinion. The last thing that I'm gonna give the W to the S5 Mark II on is rolling shutter performance. Rolling shutter is not the best on either camera. The S5 Mark II's readout is slightly faster than the A7 IV, so what that means is you're gonna see less rolling shutter on the S5 Mark II than you will on the A7 IV. And then there's one other thing I meant to mention that I didn't. The S5 Mark II can record in higher frame rate options. So I think there's a 180 and a 240 if I'm not mistaken. I don't use those, but it is there if that's something that you are interested in. Now, I said all this great stuff about the S5 Mark II, Terry. What about the A7 IV? First thing is 33 megapixels versus 24 megapixels, okay? I've always felt like 24 megapixels was the sweet spot, but once you go to 33 megapixels, it's even better, and the file sizes are not too big. Plus, you can still go into your different levels of compression. So you could go RAW, you go 12-bit RAW, you could go small, medium, large, all in camera. You can take your pick, and you can shoot at HEIF photos. Now, the next reason that you may want to choose the A7 IV over the Panasonic S5 Mark II is because the A7 IV shoots faster when it comes to drive speed, right? So the A7 IV could do 10 frames per second mechanical burst shooting with full continuous autofocus and 12-bit compressed RAW. Now, if you go to uncompressed RAW, that goes down to 7 frames per second. The S5 Mark II can only do 7 frames per second when it comes to mechanical with continuous autofocus, or you can go up to 9 if you go to single point. So I got to give the W for that particular thing to the Sony A7 IV. I would much rather, and this is me personally, take the 10 frames per second mechanical along with the 33 megapixels on the Sony A7 IV over the 24 and 7 on the S5. The next big thing, and this is a huge thing, yo, is the photo video switch on the Sony A7 IV. I have sung this switch's praises on the A7 IV and the A7R5. Being able to flip back and forth between photo and video and have custom settings for both is game changing. The S5 Mark II, you can kind of do that because you can set up these C1, C2, and C3 to whatever you want, but nothing beats a physical freaking switch. So that W goes to the Sony A7 IV. The next thing I really want to spend a little bit of time on is ecosystem. E-mount crushes everything out there. Listen, Panasonic has the L-mount alliance. They have some great lenses, right? But nothing competes with the amount of lenses available on E-mount. You have native Sony with their regular stuff. You have G lenses, G Master lenses. You got lenses from Mikey, Tamron, Sigma, Viltrox, I'm getting confused because there's so many of them. Sigma, and all of the other people who make freaking lenses for the Sony A7 IV. It is remarkable how many lenses there are for this ecosystem and for this camera. So if the amount of lenses is important to you, hands down, that goes to the Sony A7 IV. Now you can adapt lenses for both systems, but lenses designed for E-mount crushes the competition, everybody. Now here's another thing that I've found to be way better on the A7 IV. I shouldn't say way better, but it is still better. I know that the S5 Mark II has a new phase detect autofocus system, and don't get me wrong, it's good. Panasonic has updated it several times already. Even though it's good, I still find the A7 IV to be the much better camera when it comes to autofocus. And the reason I'm saying that is because the S5 has failed me a few times where it's decided to just not work. And I might have messed it up. I might have made some errors in which mode I picked and all that stuff. But the difference is with the A7 IV, it just knows what it's doing at all times. I don't have to put it into a specific mode to get it to do what I want it to do. It just freaking works. It seems way more confident. It is a quicker system. And again, that's not to say that the S5 Mark II is bad. It's way better than what Panasonic offered before. But if I have to choose between the two, autofocus hands down is the A7 IV. Now here's another petty thing you might want to consider the A7 IV over the S5 Mark II for. The fact that the A7 IV has a lock button on this dial right here. On the S5 Mark II, I find myself constantly rotating this dial because it has no resistance to it. The SD card slot door has a lock mechanism on the A7 IV. On the S5 Mark II, it doesn't. Not a huge deal, but I will say that I prefer the A7 IV's lock implementation when it comes to buttons better. Now, I should have just said this while I had the freaking doors open, but the A7 IV can accept CF Express Type A. This cannot. So that means faster recording rates, faster data rates, etc. on the A7 IV than you get on the S5 Mark II. Now also, because this is a 33 megapixel sensor versus the 24 megapixel sensor on the S5 Mark II, the A7 IV's 4K is downsampled from 7K, whereas the S5 Mark II's 4K is downsampled from 6K. So the A7 IV in photos and video is gonna give you a slightly sharper picture. It's not a huge deal, but it is there just so you know. The next thing I really love about the Sony A7 IV when it comes to IBIS, I think the S5 Mark II has the better system. However, the A7 IV doesn't have wobbles because the IBIS isn't as strong, but also it has Catalyst Browse, so it records all the gyro data so you can stabilize everything and post if you want to, whereas the S5 Mark II cannot do that. The A7 IV does do intro recording where the S5 Mark II only does long GLP, and that's not a huge deal for some people, but for people who it is a big deal to, it's a big deal. A few other small things real quick. The S5 Mark II does have a smaller battery, so that W goes to the A7 IV. In practice, I've been able to probably get about 15 to 20% more battery out of the A7 IV than the S5 Mark II. The A7 IV also has breathing compensation and focus map. Now, breathing compensation, I mean, I gotta give it the W because it's a dope feature, but to Panasonic's defense, a lot of their lenses don't suffer from breathing, so you know what, that's actually a wash. I can't give that W to the Sony because Panasonic don't need it. The other thing is the A7 IV does have built-in live streaming options where the S5 Mark II doesn't. Final two things I will give the W to the A7 IV for. I think the A7 IV is the more fluid camera. There's some unexplained lag throughout the operating system on the Panasonic, even though it's fast, but the A7 IV, I don't get any lag like that. And I love how Sony has given us digital mics. Both of them have a digital hot shoe, so you can do 48 kilohertz, 24-bit. Actually, on the Panasonic, you go up to 96 kilohertz, but on Sony cameras, you could get microphones like the ECM B10, the ECM B1M, etc. And those give you a really good audio experience. And because they're digital, they do a lot of the processing for you on board. They're really game changing. Panasonic has not come out with anything like that so far. Now, again, both of these are fantastic cameras, and I know I've missed a whole lot of stuff because we could be talking for freaking 5 hours about every single little nuanced detail. Let me wrap everything up for you and bring it full circle. This is how it boils down, right? I'm not going to tell you which one is better because they both have strengths and weaknesses, and your strengths and weaknesses might be different from the next person's, right? The A7 IV I feel like is better suited for photographers who want a good mix of video options, whereas the S5 Mark II is really geared towards people who want to take videos seriously and want photography in there also. I think value-wise, I think the A7 IV gives you less than the Panasonic S5 Mark II does when it comes to video. The S5 Mark II absolutely crushes it, but when it comes to photo, I think the A7 IV hands it the W. So it's not really a case of which one I think is better. It's really what suits your needs better. How much money do you want to spend? Could you get away with an S5 Mark II, spend 500 bucks less and have a really, really competent camera? Absolutely. This thing is a beast, but this thing is a beast also. You really need to decide what's more important to you. Is lens ecosystem, more reliable autofocus, higher megapixels, faster burst shooting with photos, live streaming ability, better battery life? Is that more important to you, or is having a camera that has way more video features, that's still very competent as a photography camera, that has great autofocus, not as good as the Sony, but it's still great, dual card slots, great battery life? Are all of those things more important to you for 500 bucks less? Sans the ecosystem, that's totally up to you to figure out. So anyways, woo, I'm getting hot. I gotta go pick the kids up from school, so I think I covered everything I wanted to cover. Let me know what y'all think down in the description, and let me know what your preference is. Is the A7 IV or is it the Panasonic S5 Mark II? And until next time, I think I'm out of here. So peace and chicken grease, tight shirt, Terry Warfield, I'm out. Peace.